What the hell is this?
The flight attendant's face twisted with disgust.
Since when do people like you sit in first class?
He blocked the aisle, arms crossed, glaring down at the black woman in seat 4A.
Look at you, the busted suitcase, the foil-wrapped whatever you look like. You can barely afford a bus ticket and you're sitting in first class.
She looked up at him, quiet, still.
This is my seat.
He let out a loud, mocking laugh.
Your seat. Oh, that's rich. You probably stole this ticket or scammed the system because people like you, broke, ghetto, bottom of the barrel, you don't belong here.
She said nothing, just folded her hands and breathed. Every passenger in first class watched. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. What that man didn't know, the woman he just called broke had a daughter, and that daughter owned more than his entire airline. Man, he really said all that to the wrong person. Let's see what happens. Let me take you back to where this all started. 6 hours before that flight. Atlanta, Georgia. A quiet neighborhood where the lawns are small but clean and everybody waves at the mailman. Brenda Holloway woke up at 5 in the morning. Not because she had to, because that's what 35 years of teaching third grade does to your body clock. You wake up early. You make the bed, you start the coffee before the sun comes up. Her house was nothing fancy. A little ranch-style place with floral wallpaper she picked out with her husband Earl 20 years ago. Earl's photo still sat on the mantle. His reading glasses still rested on the kitchen counter. He'd been gone for 4 years now, but Brenda kept everything exactly where he left it. Like he might walk back in any minute and ask what's for dinner. This morning was special, though. Brenda was flying to Seattle. Her daughter Tasha was turning 38, and Brenda had spent 2 full days baking the perfect pound cake, Earl's recipe. Brown butter, vanilla bean, a little bit of lemon zest, the one Tasha used to beg for every single birthday since she was 9 years old. Brenda wrapped the cake in foil, placed it carefully in her carry-on, and zipped up her old rolling suitcase. The zipper stuck halfway. She wrestled it closed with both hands. She picked out a simple blouse, tan slacks, and Earl's cardigan, the big navy blue one that hung past her hips. It smelled like old wool and faint cologne. She wore it every time she flew. Made her feel like he was traveling with her. Her phone buzzed. Tasha. "Mama, please let me send the jet, or at least let me book you first class." Brenda shook her head, even though Tasha couldn't see it. "Baby, I've been a flying coach for 62 years. I'm not about to start acting brand new." "Mama, I said no, Tasha. Save your money." Save your money. That's what she always said. Even though her daughter had more money than some small countries, even though Tasha had built Skylane Logistics from a single cargo route into a multi-billion-dollar empire, freight, aviation, shipping, holding stakes in airlines across the country, even though one of those airlines, Crestline Air, was the exact airline Brenda was about to board. Tasha didn't push it, but she did one thing behind her mother's back. She quietly upgraded Brenda's seat to first class. No note, no fuss. Just a small gift her mother would discover at the gate. Brenda wouldn't have accepted it if she'd known. The rideshare arrived at 6:15. Brenda tipped the driver $12 on a $9 ride. She told him to have a blessed day. She carried her old suitcase through the terminal with the pound cake balanced on top, and she smiled at every stranger she passed. That was Brenda Holloway, modest, warm, invisible to anyone who measured worth by what you wore. Now let me tell you about the man who was about to ruin her day. Craig Ellison had been a flight attendant for Crestline Air for 15 years, senior purser, the one who ran the cabin like it was his personal living room. Tall, clean-shaved, smiled like a toothpaste commercial, but only for certain passengers. If you were white, well-dressed, and seated in first class, Craig was your best friend. He'd remember your drink order. He'd hang your coat. He'd call you sir like he meant it. But if you were black, Latino, Anyone who didn't fit his mental picture of what a premium passenger looked like, Craig had a different playbook. Suddenly, there were booking errors. Suddenly, overhead bins were reserved. Suddenly, the rules got very, very specific, but only for you. 14 passengers had filed complaints against Craig over the years. 14. Every single one was a person of color, and every single complaint had been buried by a middle manager named Garrett Moore, who liked Craig's customer satisfaction scores and didn't like paperwork. So, Craig kept flying, kept smiling at the right people, kept treating everyone else like they were trespassing. This morning, Craig stood at the front of the cabin running his pre-flight briefing with the crew. Denise Caldwell, a younger attendant, listened with her hands clasped. "First class is full today," Craig said, scanning the manifest. "Let's keep the standards high. If anyone looks like they don't belong up there, wrong seat, wrong ticket, whatever, flag it. I don't want any issues." Denise nodded. She'd heard this speech before. She knew what "looks like they don't belong" really meant. She said nothing. Then the boarding door opened, and Brenda Holloway walked onto the plane. Brenda stepped into the first-class cabin holding her boarding pass in one hand and the foil-wrapped pound cake in the other. She found seat 4A, window side, and settled in. The leather was soft, the legroom was wide. She ran her fingers along the armrest and smiled to herself. Tasha must have done this. That girl never listened. She tucked the cake gently under the seat in front of her, placed her old suitcase in the overhead bin, adjusted Earl's cardigan around her shoulders. Then she sat back, folded her hands, and looked out the window at the tarmac. She looked peaceful, content, like a woman who had earned the right to sit anywhere she pleased. Craig Ellison saw her from 10 rows away. He stopped mid-sentence. His eyes narrowed. He watched Brenda open the overhead bin, watched her struggle slightly with the suitcase, watched her smooth down her blouse and settle into 4A like she owned it. His jaw tightened. He didn't say anything at first. He just watched, the way a dog watches a squirrel before it bolts. Then he moved. He walked up the aisle, slow and deliberate. He passed a white businessman in 2C without a glance, past the blonde woman in 3A who was shoving an oversized designer bag into the overhead bin. Didn't say a word. He walked right past all of them and stopped directly in front of Brenda. "Ma'am?" Brenda looked up, smiled. "Yes? I need to see your boarding pass." "Of course." She handed it over, still smiling. Craig held the pass between 2 fingers like it was contaminated. He studied it front and back, tilted it toward the light. Then he looked at Brenda, at the cardigan, the simple blouse, the foil-wrapped cake peeking out beneath the seat. "There's gotta be a mistake." "Excuse me?" "This says first class, seat 4A. "That's right. That's where I'm sitting." Craig exhaled through his nose, loud, like he was trying to keep himself calm in front of a misbehaving child. "Ma'am, I see these things all the time. System glitches, buddy passes that get misrouted. Someone types in the wrong confirmation code, and suddenly they're in a seat they never paid for." He paused, let the words sink in. "Are you sure this ticket is legitimate?" Brenda's smile faded, just slightly. "I'm sure. Because I can check with the gate agent. It would only take a minute." "You don't need to do that. The ticket is real." He stared at her for 3 long seconds, then handed the pass back without another word. No apology, no "enjoy your flight." He just turned and walked away. But he wasn't done, not even close. Phil Dawson sat 2 rows ahead in seat 2A, 60 years old, retired federal judge. He'd flown enough flights to know when something was wrong. He watched Craig walk away from Brenda with a clenched jaw and thought, that man didn't check a single other passenger's boarding pass. Phil said nothing yet, but he kept watching. 20 minutes later, the boarding door closed. The cabin was full. A white couple in row 3 were laughing about their vacation plans. The businessman in 2C was already asleep, and Brenda was reading a paperback novel she'd brought from home, some romance story with a cracked spine and dog-eared pages. That's when Craig came back. "Ma'am, I need you to remove your bag from the overhead bin." Brenda looked up. "I'm sorry?" "Overhead space in first class is limited. It's reserved for passengers with full fare tickets. You'll need to gate check your bag." Brenda glanced at the bin above her. Right next to her old suitcase sat the blonde woman's massive designer bag, twice the size of Brenda's, spilling over into the next compartment. "What about her bag?" Brenda asked quietly. "It's bigger than mine." Craig didn't even look. "That's not your concern. I'm asking you to remove yours." Brenda stared at him. She could feel it now, that old familiar weight settling on her chest, the one she'd carried since she was a little girl in Alabama, the one that said, "They see your skin before they see you." She stood up, pulled the suitcase down, handed it to Craig without a word. But the cake. She reached under the seat and cradled the foil-wrapped pound cake in her arms. "I'll keep this with me." Craig looked at the cake like she was holding a dead animal. His nose wrinkled. "What is that?" "A birthday cake. I made it for my daughter." "In foil?" "Yes." He smirked. That little half smile that people use when they're enjoying someone else's discomfort. "Fine. Just make sure it doesn't make a mess up here. This isn't an economy." He took her suitcase and walked away. Brenda sat back down. She held the cake in her lap with both hands, her fingers pressed into the foil. Phil Dawson watched the whole thing. His hand moved toward his jacket pocket, where his phone was. Not yet, but soon. The plane took off. 30 minutes into the flight, the drink cart rolled through first class. Craig worked the cart himself, unusual for a senior purser, but he wanted to be in the cabin, wanted to be close. He poured champagne for the couple in row 3, handed a whiskey to the businessman in 2C, who had woken up just long enough to order, gave the blonde woman sparkling water with a lemon wedge and a warm smile. Then he reached Brenda. "What can I get you, ma'am?" Brenda looked at the menu card in the seat pocket. "I'll have a glass of white wine, please." Craig's hand stopped on the cart. He didn't move. He just stood there, looking down at her. "The wine?" "Yes, please." He tilted his head. Then he raised his voice, not shouting, but loud enough that the rows around them could hear every single word. "Ma'am, the complimentary beverage service is for passengers who purchased qualifying first-class fares. And I have to be honest with you. I've been doing this job for 15 years. I know what a real first-class passenger looks like." He gestured at her with one hand, up and down, head to toe. "And this isn't it." The cabin went quiet. The couple in row 3 stopped talking. The blonde woman looked over. Even the businessman in 2C opened one eye. Brenda's voice was barely above a whisper. "I have a first-class ticket. The drinks are included." Craig shook his head slowly, dramatically, like a teacher correcting a student who should know better. "Let me be real with you, ma'am. I'm trying to save you from embarrassing yourself. Look at you. The old clothes, the homemade cake in tinfoil, the suitcase that's older than half the passengers on this plane." He leaned closer. His voice dropped, but not enough, not nearly enough. "You look broke. You look like someone who wandered up here by accident. And honestly, I don't know how you got this seat, but we both know you can't afford it. You look broke." The words hit the cabin like a thunderclap. Someone behind Brenda gasped. The blonde woman covered her mouth. The couple in row 3 suddenly found their laps very interesting. Brenda didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. Her eyes glistened, just barely, but she held perfectly still. 35 years of standing in front of classrooms full of children had taught her how to hold herself together when everything inside her was breaking. "A water is fine," she said quietly. Craig poured the water, set it down on her tray with a sharp clack. Then he turned to Denise Caldwell, who stood frozen behind the cart with wide eyes and a red face. He didn't whisper. He didn't even try. Don't bother offering her the snack basket either. She probably can't even afford to tip the cab when she lands. Denise looked at Brenda, looked at Craig, looked at her own shoes. She said nothing. Phil Dawson pulled out his phone, pressed record, rested it casually against his armrest where no one would notice. He'd been a judge for 30 years. He knew evidence when he saw it being made. Brenda sat still for a long time after that. The wine she didn't get, the water she didn't touch, the cake in her lap that she held a little tighter now. She turned her face toward the window and watched the clouds roll past. Then she picked up her phone. Her hands trembled, just slightly, as she typed a message to Tasha. Having a rough flight, baby. A man on the crew called me and broke in front of everyone, took my suitcase, wouldn't give me a drink. I'm okay. Don't worry about me. I'll see you soon. I love you. 3,000 miles away, in a corner office 40 floors above the Seattle skyline, Tasha Holloway's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen. She read the message once, then again, then a third time. Her face went completely still, the kind of still that comes right before a storm. She picked up her desk phone and called Brenda. It rang twice. Mama, tell me exactly what happened. It's nothing, baby. Just a rude man on the plane. He said I looked broke, that I didn't belong in first class. It's fine. I'm used to... No. Tasha's voice was quiet, but underneath it was something sharp, something dangerous. You don't get to be used to it. Not anymore. What airline? Crestline Air, Flight 412. But Tasha, please, don't make a fuss. Mama, I love you. Don't say another word to that man. I'll be at the gate when you land. She hung up, opened her laptop. The Skylane Logistics dashboard filled the screen. She clicked through 2 menus. There it was, subsidiary holdings, Crestline Air, 68% controlling stake, owned by Skylane, owned by Tasha. The man who just called her mother broke was employed by a company her mother's daughter owned. Tasha picked up the phone again. Give me the crew manifest for Crestline Flight 412. Get Gerald on the line and call the chair of Crestline's board. Tell him I need a conversation before that plane touches the ground. The seatbelt sign turned off. The cabin settled into that quiet mid-flight hum, the kind where most people close their eyes and disappear into their headphones. But Brenda couldn't disappear because Craig Ellison wasn't finished with her. 45 minutes after the drink cart incident, Craig walked back up the aisle. His steps were harder now, his shoulders squared. Whatever fake politeness he'd been wearing before, gone. He stopped at row 4, looked down at the foil-wrapped pound cake in Brenda's lap. Ma'am, what is that? Brenda looked up. I told you earlier, it's a birthday cake for my daughter. In foil. Yes. Craig crossed his arms. A passenger has raised a safety concern about your item. A safety concern? It's a cake. It's an unidentified food item wrapped in metallic material. Cabin safety issue. I need to confiscate it. Brenda looked around. The blonde woman in 3A had an open bag of trail mix on her lap. The businessman in 2C had a sandwich and wax paper from the terminal. Nobody said a word to them. Sir, this is a homemade pound cake. I made it from scratch. I've been baking it for my daughter's birthday every year since she was 9. Craig didn't blink. I don't care if you've been baking it since the Stone Age. Unidentified food in foil is a violation of cabin protocol. Hand it over. But other passengers have food. Other passengers aren't my concern right now. You are. He reached down and grabbed the cake. Not gently. He grabbed it the way you'd grab trash off a park bench. Brenda held on. For 1 second there was a tug. Her hands on one end, his on the other. The foil crinkled. A piece of the cake's edge crumbled onto her slacks. Ma'am, Let go. She let go. Craig held the cake at arm's length like it was something dirty. He turned to Denise Caldwell, who stood behind him with wide eyes. Get rid of this. Denise took the cake. Her hands were shaking. She looked at Brenda, at the crumbs on her lap, the trembling fingers, the moisture building along her lower eyelids. Denise opened her mouth. For 1 second, it looked like she might say something. She closed her mouth, walked to the galley with the cake. Craig looked back at Brenda and shook his head, slow, theatrical. Maybe next time, buy a cake at the airport, like a normal person. He paused, then added with a smile, oh wait, that would require actually having money. He walked away. Brenda sat still. A crumb of pound cake, Earl's recipe, brown butter and vanilla bean, sat on her knee. She picked it up with 2 fingers, held it, then closed her fist around it. She didn't cry, but her chin trembled, just once. Phil Dawson's phone had been recording for 22 minutes straight, 2 hours into the flight now. Cabin lights dimmed to that blue-gray glow that makes everything feel like a dream. What happened next was no dream. Craig came back, one final time. He stood over Brenda with a clipboard, like he'd found a prop for his performance. Ma'am, I need you to move. Brenda looked up. She hadn't spoken to anyone since the cake. Her novel sat unopened. Her water was untouched. Move where? Seat 34B, economy, middle seat. Why? We're rebalancing the cabin for weight distribution. You need to relocate. Brenda looked around first class. 6 passengers, all white, all comfortable, all undisturbed. Why me? Random selection. Random. That's what I said. Brenda shook her head. No. Craig's eyebrow went up. Excuse me? I said no. I paid for this seat. I'm not moving. Something shifted in Craig's face. The mask slipped. The professionalism, the clipboard performance, all of it fell away. What was left was raw, ugly. He leaned down, close enough that she could smell his cologne. Sharp, chemical, suffocating. Close enough that his breath hit her cheek. He lowered his voice, but not low enough. Phil Dawson's phone caught every syllable. Listen to me. I've been doing this for 15 years. 15 years of dealing with people like you. Broke, loud, entitled, thinking you can scam your way into first class and play victim when someone calls you out. His voice got harder. You don't belong here. You have never belonged here. The only reason you're still in that seat is because I haven't called the captain yet. He straightened up, looked down at her like something stuck to his shoe. Move yourself to 34B, or I'll call the captain, he radios ahead, and police will be waiting at the gate. Your choice, but you are not staying in first class. 3 words hung in the air. Broke, loud, entitled. Said to a 62-year-old retired teacher whose only crime was being black in a seat a white man decided she didn't deserve. Brenda looked up at him. Her eyes were dry now. Something had changed, hard and clear, like glass after rain. 35 years of facing down bullies on playgrounds and angry parents at conferences. She knew this man. She'd known 100 versions of him. My name is Brenda Holloway, and I am not moving. Craig's face turned angry red. The kind of red that comes when a man used to power meets someone who won't bend. He grabbed the intercom phone. Captain, this is Ellison, non-compliant passenger in first class, seat 4A. Disruptive, combative, refusing crew instructions, requesting law enforcement on arrival. Disruptive, combative, refusing instructions. Brenda had not raised her voice once, had not stood up, had not touched or threatened anyone. She just sat in her seat and said no. But in Craig's report, she was a threat, a danger. Because that's how it works. When you're black and you refuse to shrink, they call it aggression. Passengers shifted uncomfortably. Some looked at Brenda with pity. Some looked away. A woman across the aisle clutched her purse tighter. Reflex, habit, the kind of small cruelty that doesn't know it's cruel. Brenda picked up her phone, called Tasha. One ring. Tasha answered before the second. Mama? Baby? Her voice cracked. First time off flight. Not loud, just a tiny fracture, like a hairline crack in a teacup holding hot water too long. They're calling the police on me. What? He told the captain I was disruptive, combative. Tasha, I didn't do anything. I just sat here and said no. Silence. Then Tasha's voice, low, controlled, burning underneath like coals. Mama, don't say another word to anyone on that crew. Don't move. Don't apologize. I'll be at the gate when you land. Tasha, I don't want trouble. Mama, he called you broke. Took your cake. Now he's sending police after you for sitting in a chair? The trouble already found you. Now I'm gonna find him. A pause. He has no idea what's coming. Tasha hung up, stood at her office window 40 floors above Seattle. The city below like a circuit board, lights and motion and power. Her reflection stared back, calm face, burning eyes. 3 calls in 4 minutes. Legal counsel, VP of operations, chair of Crestline Air's board. The last call was short. This is Tasha Holloway. Your senior purser on flight 412 just spent 3 hours racially abusing my mother. I want the crew manifest, every complaint filed against this man, and a conference call with your executive team before that plane lands. 90 minutes. She set the phone down, straightened her jacket, walked out. Her assistant looked up. Miss Holloway, where are you going? SeaTac, gate B16. My mother lands in 85 minutes. She paused in the doorway. Call security. I want a Skylane representative at that gate when the door opens. This ends tonight. Yo, I gotta stop right here. Because nah. This man really called a whole grandmother broke, snatched her birthday cake, and then called the police? I'm sorry, but if you're not heated right now, something's wrong with you. Anyway, buckle up, because the flip is coming. The wheels hit the runway at SeaTac with a hard thud. The cabin jolted. Overhead bins rattled. Passengers stirred from their seats like nothing had happened. But something had happened, and it wasn't over. Craig Ellison stood at the front of first class, vest straight, chin up, hands behind his back. He looked like a man who had already won. The captain had radioed ahead. Law enforcement was waiting. In Craig's mind, this was the final act. The broke black woman escorted off the plane in front of everyone. Proof that he was right all along. The aircraft door opened. 2 airport police officers stepped on board. One of them was Officer Ray Patterson, 40 years old, square jaw, calm eyes. The kind of cop who asks questions before reaching for anything on his belt. Craig pointed at Brenda. Didn't hesitate, didn't even lower his voice. That woman, seat 4A. She's been disruptive and non-compliant the entire flight. Refused multiple crew instructions. I need her removed. Patterson looked at Brenda. She sat exactly where she'd been for 3.5 hours. Hands folded, back straight, eyes red but dry. She hadn't moved, hadn't raised her voice, hadn't done a single thing except exist in a seat she was told she didn't deserve. Patterson opened his mouth to speak. He didn't get the chance. Phil Dawson stood up from seat 2A, slowly, deliberately, the way a man stands when he's about to change the direction of a room. Officer, my name is Phil Dawson, retired federal judge, District of Columbia. I've been sitting 2 rows ahead of this woman for the entire flight. He held up his phone. The screen was still recording. I have the whole thing, every word, every interaction. That woman did not raise her voice once. She did not threaten anyone. She did not refuse any lawful instruction. What she did was sit in her assigned seat and decline to be humiliated. He pointed at Craig. That man called her broke in front of the entire cabin. He confiscated her personal property, a birthday cake, without cause. He fabricated a disturbance to weaponize law enforcement against a black woman who did nothing wrong. I recorded all of it. 3 hours of footage. Craig's face drained, white as the cabin walls. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. He's exaggerating. I was following protocol. Patterson raised one hand. Sir, step back. Now. Craig stepped back. Patterson looked at Brenda. Ma'am, are you all right? Brenda nodded. She picked up her purse and stood on legs that were stiff from sitting still for too long. Patterson walked beside her, not behind her, beside her, through the jet bridge. The door to the gate opened, and there she was. Tasha Holloway stood 10 feet from the gate door. Gray suit cut like armor, hair pulled back tight. 2 people in dark suits flanking her. Gerald, Skylane's chief legal counsel, and the VP of operations. Brenda saw her daughter and stopped walking. Her lip trembled. Tasha crossed the distance in 3 steps and wrapped her arms around her mother, held her tight, held her the way you hold someone who has just survived something they never should have had to survive. I'm here, Mama. I'm here. Brenda pressed her face into her daughter's shoulder. She didn't sob. She just breathed, deep, shaking breaths, like a woman finally letting go of something she'd been carrying since takeoff. Craig followed the group through the jet bridge. He saw Tasha. Didn't recognize her. He straightened his vest, lifted his chin, and stepped forward like he still had authority here. Ma'am, I'm Craig Ellison, senior purser on this flight. I don't know who you are, but this passenger was... Tasha released her mother, turned around, looked at Craig the way a surgeon looks at a tumor. What's your name? I just said, Craig Ellison. Say it again. He blinked. Craig Ellison. Tasha nodded, slowly, like she was filing it away. My name is Tasha Holloway. I'm the founder and CEO of Skylane Logistics. She let that sit for 1 second. Skylane Logistics holds a 68% controlling stake in Crestline Air. Every plane in your fleet, every route on your map, every paycheck in your bank account. Mine. Craig's mouth fell open. No sound came out. You spent 3 hours calling my mother broke. You took a birthday cake she baked for me with her own hands. You told her, in front of 50 passengers, that people like her don't belong in first class. Then you called the police on her for the crime of sitting down. Tasha took 1 step closer. Her voice never rose. It didn't need to. The woman you called broke raised me, and I own the airline you work for. So tell me, Mr. Ellison, who doesn't belong here now? Craig couldn't speak. His hands hung at his sides. Behind him, Denise Caldwell stood in the jet bridge doorway, tears running silently down her face. The gate was quiet. Patterson stood still. Gerald opened his briefcase, and Tasha Holloway turned away from Craig Ellison like he was already gone, because he was. It took 2 hours. 2 hours for 15 years of Craig Ellison's career to disappear. The first call came while Brenda was still sitting in a private lounge at SeaTac, a cup of tea in her hands that she hadn't touched. Tasha sat beside her. Gerald stood by the window, phone pressed to his ear, scribbling notes on a legal pad. Garrett Moore, Crestline Air's VP of Customer Relations, was on a plane. Not tomorrow, not next week, right now. A direct flight from Crestline's Dallas headquarters to Seattle. The CEO had personally ordered him to get there before midnight. He landed at 11:14 p.m. Moore walked into the private lounge looking like a man who hadn't slept in 3 days, even though it had only been 3 hours. His tie was loose, his forehead was damp. He shook Tasha's hand first, held it too long, squeezed too hard. The handshake of a man who knows his company is standing on the edge of a cliff. Miss Holloway, on behalf of Crestline Air, I want to personally... Tasha held up one hand. Don't talk to me, talk to her. She pointed at Brenda. Moore turned. He looked at Brenda. The cardigan, the untouched tee, the quiet dignity that hadn't cracked even now. And for the first time, something that looked like genuine shame crossed his face. "Mrs. Holloway, I am deeply sorry for what happened to you on Flight 412. It was inexcusable. It was wrong. And I want you to know that Craig Ellison has been suspended effective immediately." Brenda looked at him. "Suspended?" "Yes, ma'am. His badge has been collected. He is barred from all Crestline aircraft and facilities pending a full investigation." Brenda nodded once, slow. She didn't say thank you. She didn't say it's okay, because it wasn't okay, and they both knew it. 30 minutes later, Craig Ellison stood in a fluorescent-lit office in the bowels of SeaTac's operations wing. 2 Crestline security officers stood by the door. Moore sat behind a desk that wasn't his, reading from a tablet. "Craig, you're suspended without pay pending investigation. Your crew badge, your access credentials, and your uniform jacket. I need them now."
Craig's face was gray. The arrogance was gone. The smirk was gone. What was left was a man watching everything he'd built slide off a table in slow motion.
"Garrett, come on. 15 years. 15 years I gave this airline."
Moore didn't look up, and in 3 hours you became the biggest liability it's ever had.
"It was a misunderstanding. She was..."
She was what, Craig? Moore's voice went flat. She was sitting in her seat, with a valid ticket, and you called her broke, on a plane owned by her daughter's company. There is no version of this that ends well for you. Craig's badge hit the desk with a plastic clack. He pulled off his uniform jacket and dropped it on the chair. He walked out of the office in a white undershirt and slacks. No badge, no vest, no authority. Just a middle-aged man walking through an empty terminal with nothing. Nobody said goodbye.
Meanwhile, 3,000 miles of internet were catching fire. Phil Dawson, with Brenda's permission and Tasha's encouragement, had sent his footage to a Seattle news station. The story aired at 11 p.m. Pacific. By midnight, it had been picked up by every major outlet in the country. The headline wrote itself: "Flight attendant calls black grandmother broke. Her daughter owns the airline." The clip everyone shared was 17 seconds long. Craig's voice, clear as glass. "You look broke. You look like someone who wandered up here by accident." Then the second clip, 43 seconds. "People like you, broke, loud, entitled, you don't belong here." 17 seconds, 43 seconds. That's all it took. By morning, the video had 12 million views. By the next afternoon, 31 million. The comment section was a wildfire. Twitter was a war zone. Instagram stories, TikTok stitches, Facebook shares, everywhere you looked, Brenda Holloway's face and Craig Ellison's voice. Hashtags climbed the trending lists like rockets. She's not broke. Who's broke now? Justice for Brenda. 14 complaints. That last one, 14 complaints, came from a leak. Someone inside Crestline had already started talking, and what they said would blow the whole thing wide open. But that night, none of that mattered to Brenda. She sat in Tasha's living room in Seattle. The TV was on. Her face was on the screen. She watched it the way you watch a car accident, unable to look away but wishing you could. Tasha sat beside her, close, shoulder to shoulder. "Mama, I know this isn't what you wanted." "No, it isn't. But this isn't just about you anymore. It's about the 14 people who complained about that man before you. People nobody listened to. It's about the next black woman who gets on a plane alone and has to sit there wondering if someone is going to tell her she doesn't belong." Brenda was quiet for a long time. The news anchor was talking about racial profiling in the airline industry. Brenda's third grade class photo, the one from her mantle, the one someone had found online, flashed on the screen. She looked at Tasha. "Then we do this right." The investigation started 3 days after Flight 412 landed. It ended 6 weeks later. What it uncovered was worse than anyone expected. Crestline Air hired an independent firm, not by choice, but because Skylane made it a condition. Tasha's legal team delivered the message in writing. Commission a full investigation, or Skylane exercises its majority stake and replaces the entire board. The investigation began the next morning. The auditors pulled 14 years of complaint records, every grievance, every incident report, every internal memo. What they found was a system designed not to solve problems, but to bury them. Craig Ellison had 14 formal complaints, every single one from a passenger of color, a Latino family on a Dallas to Denver flight. Craig forced them to gate check all 4 carry-on bags, reserved for priority passengers. The white couple across the aisle had 6 bags. Nobody touched one. A black businessman in first class, Chicago to Los Angeles. Craig looked at his ticket, looked at his face, and said in front of the cabin, "That must be a corporate freebie. Enjoy it while it lasts." A West African woman traveling alone, Atlanta to New York. Craig asked her to move seats 3 times during a single flight. 3 different excuses. She filed a complaint on landing. It was marked, resolved, no action needed, within 48 hours. 14 complaints, 14 passengers. 14 times someone said, "This man treated me differently because of my skin." And 14 times the same thing happened. The complaint landed on Garrett Moore's desk, and Moore made it disappear. The auditors found his emails. One read, "Ellison's scores with premium demographics remain strong. Complaint doesn't warrant formal action. Filing as closed." Premium demographics. That was the code. It meant white passengers, the ones who mattered. Everyone else was noise. Moore had written that email 11 times over 8 years. 11 complaints about racial profiling. Read, nodded at, closed. When the report went public, Moore didn't wait to be fired. He resigned that afternoon. 2-sentence statement about pursuing other opportunities. No apology. Just a quiet exit through the side door. Craig Ellison didn't go quietly. Crestline terminated him on a Tuesday. By that afternoon, he stood before cameras outside his lawyer's office in Dallas, eyes red, voice shaking. He called himself a scapegoat. 15 years of perfect service, and now I'm being destroyed by cancel culture and a billionaire with a grudge. He dabbed his eyes, said he never intended to offend, said his words were taken out of context, said he was not a racist. Within an hour, someone spliced his press conference with Phil Dawson's footage, side by side. Left screen, Craig crying, saying he wasn't racist. Right screen, Craig leaning into Brenda's face. "People like you, broke, loud, entitled, you don't belong here." 9 million views in 12 hours. 1 week later, the state attorney general filed civil rights charges. Discriminatory conduct, racial harassment, abuse of authority, and filing a false report to the flight deck. Brenda's legal team filed a separate civil lawsuit against Craig and Crestline Air. Racial discrimination, intentional emotional distress, unlawful confiscation of property, and systemic failure to address documented racial bias. The trial lasted 9 days. Phil Dawson testified on day 2. Calm, precise, unhurried. He described every interaction. Then the prosecution played his video, all 3 hours. The courtroom went silent. On day 5, a flight attendant who'd worked with Craig for 6 years described a pre-flight briefing where Craig pointed at the manifest and said, "2 African names in first class today. Let's keep an eye on that." On day 7, Brenda took the stand. She didn't raise her voice, didn't cry, hands folded, the same way she'd sat in 4A. She described what it felt like to be called broke in front of 50 strangers, what it felt like to have a cake baked from her dead husband's recipe ripped from her hands, what it felt like to hear a man in uniform say she didn't belong, and know everyone agreed by their silence. I've been black in America for 62 years. I've been called worse, but I have never felt smaller than I did in that seat. Not because of what he said, but because not one person said stop. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Liable on every count. Significant financial damages, enough to make national news. Craig was mandated to complete a 2-year racial bias education program. His name entered the FAA's personnel file with a permanent flag. His aviation career was over, permanently. But the reckoning didn't stop with Craig. Crestline Air announced a complete overhaul. Mandatory 40-hour bias training developed with civil rights organizations. An independent complaint review board. No more buried paperwork. Body cameras piloted for senior cabin crew. And a scholarship fund for aspiring aviators from underrepresented communities. They named it the Earl Holloway Aviation Scholarship, after Brenda's late husband, the man whose cardigan she wore on every flight, the man whose pound cake recipe started everything. Tasha made the announcement herself. Podium, Skylane logo, Brenda in the front row. My mother taught me that dignity is not something you buy, it's something you live. A man in uniform tried to strip that from her because she wasn't wearing designer clothes. He looked at her and decided she was worthless. He was wrong. She looked at Brenda, the woman he called broke and raised a billionaire. But that's not the point. She deserved respect whether I existed or not. Every passenger on every plane deserves that, starting now. Brenda sat in the front row, Earl's cardigan on her shoulders, hands folded. She didn't speak. She just nodded. Once. That was enough. So where are they now? Brenda Holloway went home to Atlanta. Same little ranch house, same floral wallpaper, same photo of Earl on the mantle. She still wakes up at 5 in the morning. Old habits from 35 years of teaching don't die easy. She still flies economy, still packs her own snacks, still wears Earl's cardigan every single time she boards a plane. But one thing changed. Crestline Air invited her to join their newly created Passenger Dignity Advisory Board. Tasha pushed for it. Brenda resisted at first. She didn't want a title, didn't want attention, didn't want to be anyone's symbol. But eventually, she said yes, on one condition. No fancy title, no ceremony. Just let me make sure no one else goes through what I went through. Now, twice a year, Brenda flies to Dallas and sits in a conference room with airline executives. She tells them what it felt like. Not the legal version, not the corporate version, the real version. The version where a 62-year-old woman held a crumb of birthday cake in her fist and tried not to cry at 30,000 feet. They listen. Every single time, they listen. Tasha Holloway kept building. Skylane Logistics expanded into 3 new markets the year after Flight 412. But the project closest to her heart was the Earl Holloway Aviation Scholarship. Fully funded, fully operational, sending 12 young people of color into aviation training programs every year. In her office, 40 floors above Seattle, there's a framed photograph on the wall behind her desk. It's not an award, not a magazine cover. It's a picture of a pound cake wrapped in foil, the one Craig Ellison confiscated. Tasha had Denise Caldwell take the photo before it was thrown away. Every investor, every board member, every executive who sits across from Tasha sees that photo. Most of them ask about it. She always tells them the same thing. That cake cost $2 in ingredients. The man who took it cost this company $50 million in damages and 10 years of trust. Never underestimate what you can lose by disrespecting someone you think doesn't matter. Tasha and Brenda celebrated Tasha's 38th birthday the day after the flight. At home. Just the two of them. Brenda baked the new pound cake. Earl's recipe. Brown butter, vanilla bean, lemon zest. They ate it on the couch watching old game shows. Brenda laughed for the first time in 2 days. Craig Ellison disappeared from public life. He never flew again, not as crew, not as a passenger on any airline that ran a background check. His press conference crying about cancel culture became a case study in corporate bias training programs nationwide. The phrase, "you look broke," followed him like a shadow. Every job interview, every Google search of his name, every room he walked into where someone recognized his face. He never publicly admitted wrongdoing, never said he was sorry. The closest he came was a statement through his lawyer calling the incident regrettable. Not wrong, not racist, regrettable. Denise Caldwell stayed with Crestline Air. She became the first crew member to complete the new bias training program, not because it was required, but because she volunteered on day one. She now mentors junior flight attendants. Her first lesson is always the same. If you see something wrong and you say nothing, you're part of it. I learned that the hard way. She sends Brenda a card every Christmas, handwritten. Every year, the same closing line. "Thank you for your grace. I didn't deserve it." Phil Dawson was honored by the National Civil Rights Coalition for his role as a bystander who acted. His video was cited in the Department of Transportation's formal inquiry report. At the ceremony, he gave a short speech. One line made the news. Justice shouldn't depend on someone pulling out a phone, but until it doesn't, keep filming. Yo, real talk, this story's fiction. But be so for real right now. Does it even feel made up? The broke comments, the stolen cake, the cops, that happens every day. I just added a billionaire daughter. The disrespect was already there. So here's my question, and I need your honest answer. If you were on that plane, if you were sitting in row 3 or row 5 or anywhere in that cabin, and you heard a flight attendant call a black woman broke to her face, would you have pulled out your phone like Phil Dawson? Would you have stood up? Would you have said something? Or would you have looked down at your lap and pretended it wasn't happening like everybody else did? Be honest. Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. And here's a second question, because this one matters even more. Should it take a billionaire's daughter showing up at the gate for a black woman to get justice? Should it take a viral video and 30 million views for someone to say this is wrong? Or should the first complaint out of 14 have been enough? You already know the answer. If this story made you angry, good. If it made you think, even better. If it reminded you of something you've seen or lived through, share it. Send it to someone who needs to hear it. Hit that like button. Subscribe, because these stories need to be told. And your voice, it matters more than you think.